You know how people joke about Karens? The ones with the stacked hair, clipboard in hand, marching around like they've been ordained by the universe to manage your life? Well, my Karen wasn't a meme. She was real. Real loud. Real controlling. And somehow, president of the Silver Pines HOA, a position she treated less like a neighborhood duty and more like a lifetime appointment to a suburban throne. My name's Travis. I'm 41, divorced, and finally living the peaceful lakeside dream I'd worked toward for years. After running a small contracting business and living out of dusty apartments for half my adult life, I used every penny of my divorce settlement and savings to buy a quiet lakefront property just outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I made sure of that. I double-checked the plat maps, the county zoning lines, even asked the lawyer to draw me a red border so bold it looked like I was buying my own country. I wasn't part of their little HOA club, and I liked it that way. But Karen didn't care about lines. Karen cared about control. At first, it was small stuff. A note under my windshield wiper reading, "Please remember to keep your shoreline tidy, for the enjoyment of all neighbors." I laughed it off. I didn't respond. Figured it was a misunderstanding. But then came the emails, ones I never signed up to receive, inviting me to HOA cleanup days, lake beautification projects, and community harmony brunches. I ignored them. Thought they'd get the hint. They didn't. One Saturday morning, I paddled out early, before the sun was fully up. The lake was still glass, mist crawling low like smoke. My black lab, Duke, sat at the front of the kayak like a proud little captain. We'd just settled into the cove near my dock when I noticed something strange on the far shore, two people in high-vis vests planting a wooden post into the ground. Then came another. And another. When I kayaked over later, I found a laminated sign hanging crookedly off one of the posts. It read, "HOA Lakefront Access Path, Silver Pines Community Use Only." I blinked. My lake. My private lake. I thought it was a mistake. Some new trail they were marking, maybe a scouting error. Until I got back to the dock and found her. Karen. In her tennis skirt and sun visor, standing like a gatekeeper at the edge of my lawn, hands on hips. "Oh, good," she chirped, "I was hoping to catch you. Just wanted to let you know that the board voted last week to officially designate Lake Esther as a community resource. Public water, you know? That means shared usage. We're organizing paddle times and rotational fishing spots, there's even talk of a floating yoga dock." She said it like she was gifting me the news. I stared at her for a full 5 seconds before I could find words. "You do realize this lake is private," I said slowly, "as in, deeded. As in, not subject to your HOA rules." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, Travis. It's lovely that you've enjoyed it on your own, but things evolve. This community is growing. And your land was once part of the original development easement. We have historical maps." I didn't even dignify that with a response. That night, I dug up my title documents, my land survey, and the 1986 court ruling that specifically removed my property, and the surrounding lakefront, from the HOA's legal reach. The lake was spring-fed, created before the subdivision even existed, and held in trust by the prior owner until I bought the whole parcel outright. But Karen didn't need facts. Karen needed to feel powerful. The next week, she was back. This time with a drone. I watched it hover outside my boathouse window like a metal mosquito, buzzing as it captured footage of me sanding down the dock railing. I yelled. I waved it off. It zipped away like a guilty child. The week after that? A complaint filed with the county alleging unauthorized aquatic structures on shared property. The target? My fishing pier. By the time the 4th week rolled around, I'd gotten 3 separate courtesy notices from the HOA, despite not being a member. One was hand-delivered. With a smile. Then came the worst of it. It was a Friday. I had just gotten home from town, groceries still in the truck bed. And there, right at the base of my dock, was a group of teenagers setting up paddleboards. One of them was hammering in a stake that read, Silver Pines Recreation Zone. And beside them, clipboard in hand like always, stood Karen. "You're trespassing," I called out, voice low but steady. Karen turned, waved casually, and shouted back, "Actually, Travis, you're the one out of compliance. This area is now recognized as a shared zone by neighborhood consensus." She actually said that. Neighborhood consensus. I didn't respond. I just took out my phone. Not to record her, though that would come later, but to call my lawyer. Because if Karen wanted a war over my lake, I was ready to drown her in paperwork. The first legal letter I sent Karen was simple, just one page. Drafted by my attorney, Brian Malloy, who looked like a sleepy golden retriever but bit like a Doberman when cornered, it stated in plain terms that my lakefront, including the entire body of Lake Esther, was private property. Not HOA owned. Not community maintained. Not subject to their bylaws. It was written with surgical precision, no insults, no grandstanding, just facts and citations in the kind of tone that says we're giving you a chance to stop. Karen didn't stop. 3 days after receiving that letter, she sent one of her own. Or rather, she had her husband, a real estate attorney with just enough ego to believe his opinions could override the law, draft a counterclaim. In it, they accused me of improper use of a naturally occurring resource and claimed the lake's spring qualified as a public water source due to its environmental significance. That phrase, environmental significance, made me laugh so hard I dropped my mug of coffee. Karen, the same woman who had organized a 4th of July boat parade with LED disco balls and water cannons, was now arguing the lake needed protecting from me. The community newsletter that week included a full-page editorial titled A Lake for All, penned by Karen Whitmore herself. In it, she accused an unnamed local landowner of selfishly gatekeeping natural resources and stifling community joy. There was a cartoon, drawn by her teenage daughter, showing a grumpy man, complete with angry eyebrows and a tinfoil hat, building a brick wall around a smiling lake where children played. My neighbors, who had always waved and chatted at the mailbox, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Some avoided eye contact. One guy, Rick, who ran the neighborhood bakery, just gave me a long sigh and said, "You really ticked off the queen this time." The breaking point came a week later. I'd just come back from a long day hauling lumber for a dock repair project. I was sweaty, sore, and ready for nothing more than a shower and some grilled salmon. Instead, I found a floating platform, complete with tiki torches, anchored dead center in the lake. On top of it, Karen. Reclining in a lounger chair, sipping something pink from a wine glass, reading Real Simple magazine like she'd claimed squatters' rights on my water. I stood on the shore, slack-jawed. She saw me and waved. "Isn't it wonderful?" she called. The HOA donated the platform. "We're calling it Serenity Island." "You're trespassing," I said. "Oh Travis," she replied, with a voice like melted ice cream. "You really should stop clinging to the past. The community is evolving." I snapped a picture. Then another. Then I turned and walked back up the hill to my cabin and called Brian. "This isn't about trespassing anymore," I told him. "This is about psychological warfare." He chuckled. "Good. I've been dying to try out the doctrine of adverse possession versus water use rights." 2 days later, I delivered a cease and desist order in person. Karen answered her door wearing a silk kimono and a deep conditioning hair mask. She didn't even blink at the document, just flipped through it like a dinner menu, then looked up and said, "You'll regret this. The lake loves me." I didn't even dignify it with a response. The next morning, I found a dozen pink plastic flamingos staked along the shoreline. Each one bore a sign, Karen's Cove, protected water space. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. Because I'd just gotten the call. The county office had approved my motion to have Lake Esther officially reclassified, designating it as a restricted access body of water tied to my property deed. That meant the legal gray area Karen had been operating in had just collapsed like a folding chair under a beach bum. And then I made the call. "Hello, Officer Ray?" "Yeah, it's Travis again." Just wanted to give you a heads up. There's going to be a removal. The lake was still that morning. No wind. No birdsong. Just the hum of anticipation vibrating through the trees like a warning before a storm. I stood at the edge of the dock, cup of black coffee in hand, as the county sheriff's boat, yes, boat, eased around the bend. Deputy Ray sat at the helm, sunglasses on, posture rigid. Beside him stood a woman in a beige windbreaker with a clipboard and the kind of no-nonsense energy that said she hadn't smiled in years. "Morning, Mr. Bennett," Deputy Ray called out. "Nice day for a reckoning," I replied. Behind me, Duke let out a single bark. Out in the middle of the lake, on what Karen still called Serenity Island, the tiki torches had been upgraded. There were now potted ferns. A cooler. A string of battery-powered fairy lights. And Karen, loud, proud Karen, was standing like the queen of her floating empire, a floppy hat casting a dramatic shadow over her face as she spotted the sheriff's boat approaching. "Visitors already," she called, arms spread like she was welcoming cruise passengers. "I haven't even finished yoga yet." But the woman in the windbreaker didn't respond with small talk. She raised her clipboard, megaphone in hand. "Ma'am, you are occupying private water in direct violation of County Statute 143b7.8. You are hereby ordered to vacate this structure immediately. Failure to comply may result in removal and fines up to $5,000. Karen laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh please," she said, brushing her hands through the air like they were flies. "This lake belongs to the people. I have HOA clearance. It's practically public property." "Incorrect," the woman replied flatly. "The property was redesignated under protective deed status 3 days ago. As of this morning, your structure is trespassing. This is not a request. It's an order." Karen's smirk wavered, just slightly. She reached for her phone. "I'm calling Harold," she barked. "My husband's a lawyer, he'll explain your mistake." But before she could hit the dial button, 2 more boats appeared from the opposite shore, rented by my attorney's team and outfitted with equipment for what they politely called floating obstruction retrieval. One had ropes and a small crane. The other? A tow line. "Ma'am," Deputy Ray said, "if you do not step off the platform now, you will be removed. You are currently committing trespass and resisting a lawful order. We really don't want to take this to the next step." Karen froze. Then, like something out of a Shakespeare play, she sank to her knees on the platform, raised her eyes to the sky, and shrieked, "This is oppression. This is theft. This is a hate crime against HOA governance." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Please escort her," Deputy Ray said. Minutes later, Karen was being ferried to shore, arms crossed, still shouting about her rights and communal intention. Meanwhile, the crew secured the floating platform and began towing it slowly across the lake, past my dock, past my kayak, past the Karen's Cove flamingos still wilting in the sun. The next HOA newsletter contained a short, quiet retraction. "We regret the miscommunication regarding lake access. All residents are reminded that HOA jurisdiction does not extend to private bodies of water unless explicitly noted in development agreements. Please direct further inquiries to the County Zoning Board." No signature. No apology. But Karen? She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because the following week, I found a petition posted in the community square, signed by Karen and 5 of her most loyal board members. Request for emergency annexation of Lake Esther into Silver Pines HOA territory, for the greater good. They had the gall to call it a public health matter. That's when I knew, this wasn't just about the lake. This was personal. I once heard a military vet describe battle not as a series of explosions, but a long string of annoyances that slowly break your mind. Karen must have read the same book. After the platform incident, I expected some level of retreat. Embarrassment. At least a cooling-off period. But no. Karen came back with the focus of a general whose troops had suffered a minor setback and now had blood in their eyes. The first strike? Paperwork. 3 certified letters in 1 week. All from different departments of the HOA. One said I owed $1,200 in community disruption penalties for unauthorized water patrol interference. Another accused me of environmental degradation due to shoreline erosion caused by aggressive dog activity. The third? It was my favorite. A formal complaint against illegal amphibious vehicles. That's right. My kayak. I sat at my kitchen table, the letters fanned out before me like a lunatic's version of a fan club. Duke sat beside me, head on my foot, sighing like he was as tired of this nonsense as I was. Then came the signs. Overnight, someone posted professionally printed signs at the entrance to Silver Pines. Warning, neighboring properties may be unsafe or non-compliant with HOA standards. The arrow pointed toward my driveway. The next day? Flyers. Dozens of them, slipped into mailboxes and taped to community mail posts. Each flyer featured a blurry zoomed-in photo of me, taken from across the lake, adjusting a light fixture on my boathouse. The caption read, "Would you trust this man to protect our lake?" It was laughable, until it wasn't. One by one, my neighbors started turning. Not overtly. But they stopped waving. They hesitated before responding when I said hello at the store. One woman I'd helped jumpstart her car last year avoided eye contact completely. I was being exiled in real time. That's when I knew the next step wouldn't be petty. It would be surgical. Karen wasn't going to shout anymore. She was going to whisper, into the right ears. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I received notice from the county environmental office. An anonymous complaint had been filed claiming I was illegally diverting water flow from a natural spring, creating downstream flooding. It was bogus. Completely fabricated. But that didn't stop an inspection. The county officer was polite but firm. He took water samples, measured slope grade, photographed everything. Standard procedure, he said, shrugging. We get calls like this all the time. Usually from HOAs. I knew this game. Karen had shifted tactics. If she couldn't kick me off the lake with HOA rules, she'd try to bury me under bureaucracy. Paper by paper, visit by visit, until I cracked or sold out of exhaustion. But I wasn't wired like that. You can only kick a dog so many times before it bites. And I had an ace up my sleeve. The counterattack. Remember that time Karen claimed my land might have once been part of the original development easement? Well, my lawyer found something even better, a clause buried in the Silver Pines Development Charter, drafted in 1992, stating, "Properties adjacent to Lake Esther shall retain full independence unless annexation is agreed upon by mutual consent of both parties and ratified by a 90% neighborhood vote." That meant not only was Karen's annexation petition nonsense, it was legally laughable. But we weren't going to just wave it around. We were going to make a show of it. That Friday, I hosted a lakeside legal barbecue. Invitations were mailed, hand-delivered, and posted on every community bulletin board. Free brisket, iced tea, and live bluegrass. Bring a chair, bring your questions, bring your curiosity. Over 30 residents showed up. Most came for the food. But they stayed for the binder. Right after dessert, I stood on my dock with a megaphone and did something Karen would never expect. I told the truth. I told them about the platform. About the faked complaints. About the flyers, the water inspection, the whisper campaigns. I passed out copies of my property deed. I passed out the HOA charter clause. And then, for the grand finale, I played a 90-second audio recording from a hidden trail cam that had caught Karen ranting into her phone while walking the shoreline one afternoon. I don't care if it's legal, Carol. The lake looks better when we're in charge. He's not one of us. He doesn't fit the vision. We'll just keep filing reports until he sells. He'll crack. They always do. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. By Monday, the signs were gone. The complaints stopped. And Karen? She was suddenly on vacation. Rumor had it, the board was quietly discussing a vote to remove her for overreach and misuse of resources. But for me, the war wasn't over. Because the lake was safe. But now, they wanted my land. If you've ever watched a wildfire, you know it doesn't roar right away. It starts as a whisper. A flickering ember. A tiny curl of smoke no one takes seriously, until it eats the whole hillside. That was Karen's strategy now, burn me out slowly. Only now, it wasn't just about the lake. It was about my land. 3 weeks after the barbecue, after the signs were pulled, after Karen's mysterious vacation began, I started noticing subtle changes around the property line. Survey flags. Little orange plastic tabs stuck into the soil, just inside the treeline along the western ridge. Then came the stakes. Then the contractors. When I approached one of the workers, he said they were mapping out a drainage control extension for the Silver Pines Greenbelt project. The Greenbelt was supposed to be a walking trail. Which was odd, considering the trail now ran through my orchard. I stormed over to the HOA office the next morning. The receptionist, a kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, just handed me a manila envelope with my name scrawled on the front. Inside? A single typed sheet. HOA letterhead. Dear Mr. Bennett. Following a recent reinterpretation of historical easement boundaries as set forth in the 1994 Silver Pines Development Amendment, we are notifying you that sections of your western property line may fall within community jurisdiction. Surveying is underway. Your cooperation is appreciated. That was it. A vague, legal-sounding nothing burger with just enough ambiguity to spook the average homeowner into submission. But I wasn't average. I called Brian. We need a historical aerial, I told him. The full plot map, including the pre-amendment county overlay. Find out who signed the 1994 amendment and who challenged it, because I guarantee someone did. And they had. A man named Luther Henley, now deceased, had filed a petition in 1995 claiming the amendment illegally altered boundaries for financial gain. His case had been dismissed on a technicality, but he'd kept meticulous notes. And those notes? They were still on file at the courthouse, in a box labeled Henley vs. Silver Pines HOA. And in that box? A hand-drawn boundary sketch. With my property clearly outlined. And a single, bold note in red ink. This parcel was never included. Whole line stops here. I framed it. But I didn't use it yet. Because that Friday, I came home to find something far worse than flags or notes. There was a bulldozer on my land. Not idling. Not passing through. Digging. I parked the truck so fast I almost took out the mailbox. Duke leapt from the back seat before I could unclip his leash. I ran, boots slamming the gravel, heart pounding like I'd caught a burglar mid-break-in. Hey! I screamed. You're on private property. The driver, contractor, maybe 50s, chewing gum like he was born to ignore rules, just shrugged. Got a permit, he said, tapping the inside of his windshield. I didn't ask to see it. I climbed the blade arm, yanked open the door, and shut off the ignition myself. You'll want to call whoever hired you, I said, voice low and cold, and tell them they just made the worst mistake of their life. He stepped off. Slowly. Like I was the crazy one. I dialed Deputy Ray. He showed up within the hour, already shaking his head. This whole operation stinks, he said, inspecting the torn earth, the spilled diesel, the shattered boundary markers I'd placed last spring. I'll file a report. But unless you have a restraining order or an active injunction. I will by Monday, I interrupted. And I did. By Monday at 9 a.m., I filed for a full property protection order. Brian delivered it personally to the county judge, who fast-tracked it after seeing the aerial maps and Karen's history of overreach. And then came the part that still makes me grin. We served Karen. Not at home. At the Silver Pines HOA board meeting. She was mid-sentence, something about streamlining green space utility rights, when Brian walked in, handed her the envelope, and whispered, "You're done." She tried to object. Claim a misunderstanding. Blame the contractor. But we had photos. Videos. And the clincher? A signed authorization form, initialed by Karen herself, giving the contractor permission to clear preliminary pathway lines on land that wasn't hers. The judge didn't just issue the injunction. He fined the HOA $25,000 for unauthorized land use. And Karen? She was officially removed as HOA president within the week. The letter came quietly. No fanfare. No newsletter announcement. Just a single sentence. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore is no longer acting president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association.